Yeah.
We shouldn't have done this at all. This was a massive mistake.
Does this place feel cursed?
Yeah. We regret it.
Cursed because even though the Tenniswoods have this deed, the Nova Scotia government claims the Hampton House is not theirs. In fact, they aren't even living here.
Right, let's go, boys.
They come to fill up bottles of drinking water, do their laundry,
I think that's a full load, honey. I'm not going to fit any more in.
and clean up.
Yeah, that room's probably...
The Tenniswoods aren't cleaning after themselves,
I hate duvet covers. I don't even know how.
but after short-term rental guests.
Oh, has he left us a bottle of wine? What a sweet man.
Vacationers who pay to stay at the one-of-a-kind Nova Scotia home with a functioning lighthouse and the Bay of Fundy in the front yard. This is where they now live, nearly an hour away. They call it the Cave. There's no running water, and only a generator for electricity.
I like to spend my time at the cave, but I don't want to live at it. It's kind of weird.
Theo's got a bunk bed, and then with Aidan, because he's over 6 foot tall, he won't fit in the other bunk bed. So we had to get a blow-up mattress, which basically takes up the floor.
I don't think it's as spacious as the Hampton House, that's for sure.
Hey, you boys! Lunch! Bring your chairs, okay? You plonked?
I'm plonked.
Okay.
The reason the Tenniswoods don't live in the Hampton House is because they're flat out broke. The only way they're surviving financially is to rent it out to vacationers.
I mean, how would you describe your finances now?
There aren't any. There aren't any. We mortgaged our home to fund the renovation of here, which was a huge risk, but we didn't feel was a risk that wasn't going to pay us back. We felt very safe in the knowledge that what we could turn this into would be a gem, and it is. And we knew that money would come back to us.
They sold their family home, maxed out their credit cards, took out loans, borrowed money from family, convinced they would recoup it all once their investment property, the Hampton House, sold.
We didn't just sink ourselves either.
No,
we
no.
sunk my dad into it too.
Yeah, we borrowed money from him.
Yeah, which we really shouldn't have done in hindsight.
When the renovation was done in July of 2022, the Tenniswoods listed the house on the market for more than $750,000.
We had, from the 600 we dropped into it, so it's 790 valuation, there was still margin there that, would have made it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And then an unexpected turn. The government of Nova Scotia has put a freeze on the house, barring them from selling it. And it's also asking the courts to return the house to the previous owner, a New York artist named Mehdi Matin.
What are you doing? This is my house. I need to get this house back. You can't have this house. What were they thinking? That I would just lay down and die? I would just let them take my house and just sit here and smile? Maybe you could steal anybody else's house. But once you do it to me, you're gonna have to contend with me.
No.
You don't have a right to this house.
Right,
we have a deed.
We have the deed.
And in your contest of that deed, you question every deed held by every Nova Scotian.
There's the possibility that you will lose this house.
Oh yeah, a strong one.
When we come back,
This sounds like a circus.
It was a circus.
a civil dispute takes a nasty turn
I paid you to fix my house. Now I'm fighting for my house?
when W5 continues.
The Bay of Fundy has some of the highest and the lowest tides in the world. Overlooking its dramatic coastline, the Hampton House, which dates back to the 1850s. Before the Tennis Woods gutted it, the house was tied to a mysterious and eccentric couple from New York. This is Harlem, about as far away from Hampton, Nova Scotia as you can get. But that's exactly what two artists from New York were looking for when they spotted a real estate listing for the idyllic Hampton House in the New York Times in the 1960s. They were the founders of something called the Uranian Philanstry, a group the gossip mill in Nova Scotia was pretty convinced was a cult. Is the Uranian Philanstry a cult?
No, we don't proselytize. Nobody's forced to come, and people just contribute what they want. I personally believe that most cults have charismatic leaders that are manipulative, which is not what Richard, Dar, or I ever aspire to be.
Mehdi Matin is a New York artist. He runs the Uranian Philanstry, which was founded in 1969 by his mentors, Richard and Dorothea Tyler, who Mehdi calls Dar.
Did they have a black magic practice? Definitely not. However, they were enchanted with things that were otherworldly and didn't shy away from them.
In the 1960s and 70s, their followers would make pilgrimages to the sleepy community of Hampton to connect with nature, have wild parties, and even a mass wedding.
I pronounce you husband and wife.
They were prolific artists.
Sentient beings never be separated from the great happiness.
Richard Tyler called himself a reverend and was into Tibetan tattooing. He died in 1983, and the Hampton House fell into disrepair. When Dorothea died in 2012, the home landed in the lap of Mehdi Matin.
I inherited everything. She was my benefactor. She understood that I would continue the work. The Hampton House was part of the work. I brought all of our community up there. Most of the inner circle has worked on the house.
Work that included redoing the roof, putting in water and electricity. And then in 2018, he hired Killer Construction, the Tennis Woods, to do even more.
How would you describe the relationship that you had with the Tennis Woods at the beginning of your contract together, that they were going to work on the house and you pay them to work on it?
Saviors. Saviors. I felt that these people were going to come in and they were going to bring my house to a new level. I was very happy.
What sorts of things were you hired to do to the house for Mehdi?
There was
Weird stuff.
weird stuff, yeah.
What he wanted to do to the home really was a very peculiar idea.
Like putting kitchens in the bedrooms.
It's never our position to argue, merely to guide and to make as many cost savings as we possibly can.
Lorna kept a detailed log and sent weekly updates to Mehdi with receipts and pictures. Mehdi, in turn, would send weekly payments from New York, a total of $82,000 over about 5 months. The Tennis Woods also say they let him know when a project was impossible.
But with the news on the barn, he lost it on that one.
When he found out that the barn he wanted saved couldn't be saved.
Couldn't be saved, yeah.
And he went crazy. He went from cool and collected and immediately completely enraged.
I got there and I saw my barn on the ground and I lost it. And I lost it. I actually strained my hamstring by kicking the dirt. I was like, why didn't you tell me?
And it was explained to him in great detail, photos, we've had emails and phone calls and all the rest of it. So the reaction when he got here to see was really quite odd because he knew it had happened.
Mehdi refused to pay for the final 2 weeks of work, a total of about $10,000. And so the Tenniswoods took Mehdi to small claims court. What should have been a simple case dragged out over 2 days.
Mehdi had become so irate, so angry.
He was hopping around all over the place.
This sounds like a circus.
It was a circus. He was screaming, mostly at the judge.
I had a breakdown because I knew what was happening. I knew that they were making a move on me. And I emotionally got so worked up, I had to leave the courtroom. I was so distraught.
The judge ruled in favor of the Tenniswoods, noting the detailed reports they had sent and noting that if Mehdi didn't keep up with those reports, he did so at his peril. In November of 2019, Mehdi Matten was ordered to pay the money he owed, just over $10,000 plus interest.
I'm not cool with that. I don't believe in that decision, right? The decision could have happened. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in it.
And when that decision came down, what was your gut reaction?
Oh, relief.
Relieved, yeah.
Relief.
Yeah.
You thought this was over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well now there's a judge or a judgment that says, okay, well you've got to pay the money.
So he's going to pay the money.
So he's going to pay the money.
Right.
But he didn't.
When the judgment comes down that says, Mehdi, you need to pay this $10,500, why didn't you just pay?
At that point, I couldn't pay them like a lump 10 grand. I paid them all this money. I'd spent all my money trying to fix that house.
7 months after the small claims ruling in June of 2020, the Tenniswoods hired Windsor, Nova Scotia lawyer Michael Mackenzie, who sent Mehdi this letter demanding payment. There was also a warning about not only the Hampton House, but another piece of land Mehdi owned in the area, this 40-acre property.
And I basically said that if he did not pay, we would be pursuing remedies, which included sale of land under execution.
What exactly is a sale of land under execution?
So you have gone to court, you have received a judgment from the court, and then you've had a year go by with either no payment or not enough payment, and you then have the right to publicly put the property up to the sheriff's office for sale.
A sale of land under execution is relatively rare, but is similar to a foreclosure. Mehdi's properties would be sold at auction, and from the proceeds, the Tenniswoods would be repaid their $10,000 plus interest. Mehdi's response to that email?
The offer was, to say the least, absurd. He owed $10,000. He was offering to come here in the summers and do work for them at $250 a day, or he was a painter. He would sell him his own paintings for 15% off. I mean, it was just an absurd offer.
And when you get this letter saying, I'm going to offer this, what's going through your mind?
We're not going to come to a settlement.
You knew.
I just said, tell your client thank you, but no thank you.
And then a second letter was sent via email and mail, just to be safe, to say, okay, you haven't paid your judgment, and now this is what happens. And it is explained to him that the sale of land under execution is initiated.
The warning in that final letter, there will be no further notice to you prior to us taking this next step.
I thought he was going to pay.
Why would somebody let their house go up for auction for what is $10,500?
Emails were sent directly to you saying, if you don't pay this $10,500, we are going to put this house up for auction.
I never got those emails. I never got those emails.
But whose fault is that you didn't respond to them or didn't open them?
I didn't get them. Call me. You're gonna take my house from an email? Make a voice registration. Hey, Manny, is this you? Yeah, it's me. We're gonna take your house. Oh, you are? Why? Oh, $10,000. Okay, give me a second. Call me.
September 2021, almost 2 years after the small claims court ordered Mehdi to pay the money, 62 Hampton Wharf Road and his 40-acre parcel of land went up for auction.
At what point did you decide, you know what, maybe we should put an offer in on this house? Maybe we should bid?
The night before.
Yeah.
The night before, my dad had come over to visit us, and we three of us sat there and talked about it over a glass of wine and decided that maybe we should.
And they did. In Nova Scotia, auctions are carried out by the Sheriff's Department. This is the sheet showing the back and forth with one other bidder. The Tenniswoods, under their company name Killer Construction, won at $50,000.
Is anybody alive? Does anybody have a pulse here? Does anybody do math? Does the sheriff do math? They should take some math classes.
$50,000 is a pretty low amount for the house and that 40 acres, right?
No, it was worth $50,000. The amount of money that needed to be poured into this house, very few people could do.
A 10% deposit is supposed to be paid on the day of auction. That would be $5,000. But the sheriff conducting the auction told them it wasn't necessary because of the debt they were owed. Instead, they were told to pay just under $3,000 to cover the cost of the auction and outstanding property taxes.
How are you gonna sell a $500,000 house, put it up for 50 without telling the guy, throw all his stuff out, and then make sure they only pay less than $3,000 for it? No, it's fine. I paid you to fix my house. Now I'm fighting for my house? Oh yeah, they did nothing wrong. Nothing.
It's a lot of pain.
A lot of pain. A lot of pain. A lot of pain. And I wake up early in the morning with it. Just right here. Every morning I say, wow, I can't believe they did this. I can't believe they got me like this.
Coming up,
We assumed he knew what he was doing.
a fatal flaw in the sale process.
Essentially, they're saying, take the house away from the Tenniswoods.
Yes.
When W5 continues.
Ian and Lorna Tenniswood never could have imagined this is where they would be living with their 2 sons. They thought buying the Hampton House at auction was a sound financial investment. When they first got the deed in 2021, they hadn't been inside since the renovations they completed for previous owner Medi Matin 3 years earlier.
We realised very early on that we were going to blow the budget that we had had in mind, because it looked very different to when we had left it in 2018 to when we had purchased it in 21. It was
in a bad.
It was in a bad way, and it had been leaking. The floor was green with slime, and it had been left really, really badly.
Their winning bid at auction was $50,000. The sheriff, Nick Murphy, told them that day to pay just the outstanding taxes and court fees, a total of less than $3,000. Then the Tenniswoods lawyer, Michael McKenzie, set to work getting the rest of the money to the sheriff's office.
So I went to the sheriff in question and I said, my client's going to arrange to get the balance of the money up to the $50,000. How long before you need it? And his reply to me was, I don't think he has to pay it.
So when the sheriff's telling you this, you're thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, in fact, that's what I said to the sheriff. I said, I don't think you're right about this. I think you're wrong. He had advised that he was going to go to his legal department. I assumed they knew what they were doing.
We have the email that Sheriff Nick Murphy sent back 3 weeks after the auction. Your client is not responsible to pay the additional outstanding balance. He even added, I'm sure your clients will be pleased to hear this.
It was the sheriff who assured me he got an opinion, and I understood he was going to Department of Justice to get his opinion. And I said, fine, if that's the opinion you've got. I would have expected different, but we're happy to hear that.
Is there a point now where you come to the realization if something seems too good to be true,
Yeah.
there's something wrong here? $2,900 for this house and 40 acres.
There was no reason to question the sheriff. It would be kind of presumptuous of us to do so.
He was the person holding the auction. We assumed he knew what he was doing.
In New York, Medi Matin claims he had no idea that the home he owned in Nova Scotia had been auctioned off because of his $10,000 debt.
The shock of it, the shock of having your house taken from you without even being told. Well, that's the worst. That's the worst. And it wasn't only the house. It was the 40 acres. And what? For $10,000? Just, this is wrong. This is wrong.
A month after learning of the auction, Medi offered the Tenniswoods $15,000 to buy the house back. They refused. And they started pouring money into the home, working around the clock. Even little Theo and Aiden had jobs to do. And then an email that changed everything.
We got the letter from the sheriff saying, basically, oops, we made a mistake. We were wrong. Your client owes the balance.
This is that oops email, with the sheriff admitting the error and apologizing. The Tenniswoods initially resisted paying.
And we had already invested those funds into the house. We were deep into the build here.
At that point, it seemed sensible that it was either us that takes the hit or they take the hit. It was their error, so it would seem reasonable that they should take the hit.
Their lawyer sent this email outlining that argument back to the sheriff's office. The Tenniswoods didn't hear another word about it until 5 months later, when the province sent them this email demanding payment.
Where does it go from there?
We came to an agreement, that is the Tenniswoods and I, that I would go back and tell them that we would pay it, but out of the sale proceeds of the house.
He says as he was preparing that agreement, with the house recently listed on the market, the Office of the Attorney General dropped a bombshell. It put a legal hold on the house, barring the Tenniswoods from selling it.
I received a notice that they were proceeding to court the Attorney General was to ask that the sale be set aside.
Essentially, they're saying, take the house away from the tennis woods.
Yes, that's exactly what they're saying.
The province of Nova Scotia claims in its suit that the deed should be declared null and void, and that the home should be returned to Medi Matin because of irregularities at auction. Irregularities directly attributed to the sheriff who conducted the auction.
To me, it's a very novel argument to say, Judge, we've done everything wrong, but we want you to find that they've done it wrong because we gave them the wrong advice.
In the Attorney General's claim against the Tennis Woods, they list the errors made by their own sheriff, Nick Murphy. He didn't properly inform Medi Matin that an auction date had been set. He didn't post auction notices on the properties. He incorrectly advised the Tennis Woods that they didn't have to pay the full bid price.
The Tennis Woods did nothing wrong. And Mr. Medi comes into possession potentially of a home that has increased in value several 100%. I have a problem with that.
Well, there we go. Wow. That's what we got so far.
This is your Tennis Woods versus Nova Scotia. This is it.
Yes.
This is our life.
Yes.
In a box.
In a box that now comes with us everywhere.
Ian and Lorna Tenniswood can no longer afford a lawyer, and so they're representing themselves.
You guys have turned into lawyers at this point.
Yeah, it's been daunting.
It has been daunting.
Yeah, it's just nerve-wracking.
Buried in paperwork as they prepare for their defense, the Tenniswoods have made some shocking discoveries. Dozens of people in the Nova Scotia Department of Justice were aware of errors relating to the auction for months, but they only appear to have acted on those errors after Medi Matin began lobbying the government and Nova Scotia's ombudsman.
I called everybody. So I was calling every single agency, any municipality to be like, what happened? What happened?
When you start tracking the dates of emails and putting them together, you realise who knew what at what time, and it's horrifying.
When did they let you know that there was a problem?
A year later.
So all that time, as you're pouring money into this house, you've discovered that they knew there was a problem with this, but they didn't act on it for a year.
Exactly 1 year.
Yeah. There are 42 government personnel over 9 different government departments that have been actively working to work out a legal way to get us out of this house and give the keys to the former owner.
The Tenniswoods say had the government acted when they knew there were errors, they wouldn't have spent $600,000 on renovations.
The motivation to hide their mistakes is completely unknown. This doesn't tell us why. This doesn't tell us why. This doesn't tell us why. None of these tell us why. They had clearly indicated there were errors. Why did you choose to sit on it, bury it, and work out a sneaky way of getting around it a year later, and you're still working on it now?
Medi Matin stands to reclaim a home that is now renovated to the hilt because of those errors. He says he deserves the house back and more.
I want my house back, I want my land back, and I want to be paid for my pain.
And what's your pain worth?
My pain? Millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. That's how much my pain is worth. This is a prima donna house. There's a Bay of Fundy. There's a whole a lighthouse on the property. This is not a $10,000, $50,000 property.
Have you seen what the house looks like now?
Yeah, I have.
And what do you make of that?
Horrible. Destroyed my life. They think they did a great job. Huh. I'm sorry. You know, disaster. Disaster. That's not my house. I'm never gonna be all right with this. This will not end right. This will not end right.
Up next.
It feels like Nova Scotia against us.
Struggling to fight the system.
Is your office doing any kind of investigation into the way these sales are conducted?
When W5 continues.
Since 1911, this lighthouse in Hampton, Nova Scotia, has been guiding fishermen through rough waters. But it's offering little help to the beleaguered owners of the home behind it. Former owner Mehdi Matten insists the Hampton House is an integral part of his spiritual group and that he is the rightful owner, not the Tenniswoods.
No way. No way. This is a legacied house. This is not just a house. This is part of our legacy.
But some residents of Hampton feel differently. Brinton Forbes is the president of the local Lighthouse and Historical Society.
When you look at this house now, what do you feel?
I feel it's one of the most wonderful things that has happened to our community, and very pleased that they have changed it and transformed it into something of pride.
Are people in the community sort of chatting about the drama that's unfolding here?
Some are.
And what are they saying?
I think most people would feel just like me. It's a David and Goliath situation. It is so unjust. It's just sad, wrong. Nova Scotia should own up to the problem they have created.
Ernie Connell grew up in Hampton. For decades, he watched the house fall into disrepair until the Tenniswoods transformed it.
And I was so happy when Ian and his wife bought it, because a lot of people wanted to bring it back like this, but nobody ever did.
What do you make of the mess that has resulted in all of this?
It's a mess. It's a mess.
This is the document that says this house belongs to you.
It is.
Well, it looks pretty worthless now, honestly. This is the most argued about piece of paper in this entire file.
The Tenniswoods may hold the deed, but the government of Nova Scotia has filed a lawsuit saying the house should be returned to Mehdi because of errors made by their own sheriff.
What they're trying to do is rip up the deed. It doesn't count. It doesn't count. We're going to give the keys to a man that went to your judgment, to your province. We're going to give him the keys.
This house represented a big dream for you guys. How do you view the house now?
We hate it. I hate it.
I know, so do I.
I
But it's a great house. It's just, it's so tainted.
It's a prison of our own making.
Yeah.
But W5 has learned that the Hampton House isn't the only Nova Scotia property auctioned off with question marks. This 3-acre parcel of land was also sold at auction by the very same sheriff, same month, same year as the Tenniswoods. And the owner says he was not warned about the auction. No signs were posted on the property. The way he found out that this land was no longer his was when his wife went to pay the property taxes.
Look, the wife come home confused, like, that property ain't in your name, and I'm like, well, I don't understand how that's possible. Like,
was there a notice put up here? Did you get anything in the mail?
No, there was no notice and there was nothing in the mail. The taxes were still paid ahead for another, I think we still were paid ahead for another year or so.
A.J. Cole says he owed money for equipment that he had purchased, but that he was given no warning that the debt would be settled through the sale of his land. Remember, before an auction, the sheriff is required to notify the owner of the land and post signs on the property. Across the province on East Loon Lake, another Nova Scotia property was sold out from under its owner, 83-year-old Nelson Miller.
They should have notified me.
Nelson only found out that the cabin and land he owned for over 40 years had been sold when he was asked by the new owner to settle an electricity bill.
The printer floored me. My property wasn't for sale and I knew nothing about it being sold. Just the thoughts that they did that and didn't notify me. That they could do something like that and not have to tell me, and I paid taxes every year for 43 years.
The person who snapped up Nelson's property gave it back, but it took thousands of dollars in legal bills for both of them to sort it all out.
I've spent a lot of money. I've had a lawyer for 2 years or more. Well, they should be responsible for some of my expenses. It's not over yet.
And then there's this parcel of oceanfront land that was auctioned off along Greville Bay for about $10,000. When the winning bidder went to see it, she says there was nothing there, just an eroded cliff and water. The county had auctioned off land that was swept away in a storm in the 1970s. We have questions for the Sheriff's Office in Annapolis Valley about the way these auctions are conducted, particularly those involving Sheriff Nick Murphy. Our repeated requests for an interview were declined, and so we caught up with Murphy's boss, Nova Scotia's Chief Sheriff, Leanne Sample, outside the Justice offices in Halifax.
Is your office doing any kind of investigation into the way these sales are conducted? We've just found a number of anomalies with sales, not just one. And I'm just wondering whether there's any plan to do an investigation.
Sorry, I do believe you were corresponded with by our communications section, so you would just have to take whatever information they've provided to you. So.
But the communications department has refused to comment, and so we took it up the ladder to the man in charge of the Sheriff's Department, Nova Scotia's Attorney General, Brad Johns.
But we have found cases of people having land sold without being notified. I'm wondering whether or not it's time to look at how the sheriff is conducting these sales.
Well, what I would say, this is the first that you're suggesting. There's a couple of cases. This is the first time I've heard of that, so I can certainly look into it. But as far as I'm aware, there's no real issues with this.
The minister says he can't speak specifically about the Tenniswoods case because it's before the courts. Medi Matten has now hired lawyer Jamie McNeil to represent him in the province's legal action against the Tenniswoods.
The sheriff's sale did not go the way the public would expect the sheriff's sale to go. There is the very real possibility the property won't end up back to him, and he'll be looking at monetary compensation himself for the loss of those properties.
Remember, this whole mess started when Medi didn't pay his outstanding debt to the Tenniswoods.
Do you take any personal responsibility in this?
Absolutely have to. Absolutely have to. If you see the way I was right in the beginning, I just blame myself. Until I realized and investigated, and I said, no, Medi, you didn't do this. It was done to you. It was done to you. And then I about-faced, and I said, anybody who says that I did anything wrong will no longer be in my life. Will no longer be in my life, because I was maligned.
And even though it was the sheriff who made errors during the auction, Medi's rage lies with Ian and Lorna.
They feel that that house is theirs. They deserve that shit. That's what they feel. And that's why this isn't gonna end well. Because if you feel you deserve my house, well, I feel otherwise. And I'm gonna weigh in every possible way.
What does that mean, Medi?
That means they're not gonna do this to me at any price. And they didn't know that. And they didn't factor that in. They didn't factor the crazy that they did this to. I don't want any violence to come to anybody, but at the same time, it's like, this is a violent thing.
But when you talk about violence, like, that's concerning.
It should be concerning. It's concerning to me. I hear it and I'm like, Medi, that's not right. And essentially what I'm saying is that there's a deep hurt there, and it's like an animal. It's like if you corner an animal, it's gonna fight back. It's gonna fight back in a really, really awful way. And the way I fight back is not the same way that most people fight back. And I'm taking all the precautions for myself so that I don't become a person I don't wanna become. But I really need the help of the courts, and I really need my house back. And I really need these people to get the out of my life permanently, period. And I need them to stop with me. And if they don't, There's no telling what my limits are. I know that. I know that about myself. I'm not limited like other people, you know?
Mehdi says that you guys have destroyed him, that you're essentially stealing the home from him.
I'm afraid not, man. You don't love this house. You didn't care for this house, and you treated it so poorly that, frankly, without us, it would have fallen down anyway. Okay, the sheriff didn't warn him, but my God, I don't know how many warnings an adult would need. It's like dealing with a toddler.
This is where Ian and Lorna are mounting their battle to keep the Hampton House.
We're our own lawyers, and we're kind of making stuff up as we go along now, and
Yeah, I don't know. It's a mess over here.
it feels like Nova Scotia against us, because I think that truly is what it is. Nova Scotia against two little people, and all they did was bought a house at an auction.
For months, the Tenniswoods have been acting as their own lawyers, but they now realize they need help in fighting the province of Nova Scotia. And so they've hired a lawyer who will only be paid if he wins or if there's a settlement. The trial isn't slated to begin until August of 2024. We'll be back with the last word.
I was desperately trying to understand what was going on.
A hockey coach behind bars,
There was very little hope.
trapped in a foreign country.
Solitary confinement is designed to break you.
W5 reveals how the love of sport
Oh my, this is special.
helped a die-hard fan
There's a chance we might not ever see Sam again.
survive a brutal prison.
This is going to take a miracle.
An all-new W5 with Avery Haynes, next Friday at 10 on CTV.
President's car is now turning onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter
In 2013, on the 50th anniversary of President Kennedy's assassination, W5 took a look back at the legacy of JFK and the events that unfolded on that fateful day.
And this shot entered from the front and blew out the back of the president's head.
And we also took a look in a different direction.
History tells us what happened here, but what it does not do is answer the compelling question, what if it never did happen? What if JFK had lived?
Why are we still talking about JFK?
My belief is that had John Kennedy lived, we would not have been in a shooting war in Vietnam. Without the war in Vietnam, you would not have had the level of anti-Americanism, the flirtations with violence, the embrace of flag burning.
Kennedy as world savior, it is a popular view, but there was a hidden side to him as well.
He was exposing himself to potential blackmail at every moment, consorting with the mistress of a mafia chief in Chicago.
You can watch that full story as well as all of our new investigations on W5's official YouTube channel. And subscribe to our newsletter to get an early look at the stories we're working on. I'm Avery Haynes. On behalf of everyone at W5, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.